the future. The people who dare to imagine impossible things often appear fearless from the outside. They speak with certainty, they move with intensity, they build systems that reshape industries, challenge governments, alter economies, and redefine how civilization thinks about progress itself. To the world, they look unstoppable, untouchable, almost mechanical in their ability to endure pressure. But behind every visionary mind is a hidden emotional universe that very few people ever truly see. You know, and tonight I want to talk about that invisible world, not the world of rockets, algorithms, markets, or machines. Buzz, I want to talk about the moment when even the most powerful mind on Earth encounters something it cannot fully calculate. Mystery of human connection. Bend us because history has always focused on the public achievements of extraordinary people while quietly ignoring the emotional forces that shape them privately. We study inventions, we analyze strategy, we admire innovation, but we rarely ask the deeper question. Who changed the emotional landscape of the person behind the ambition? Chand as who reached the soul behind the empire? Who reached the soul behind the empire? Who captured the heart of someone whose mind was already chasing the stars? That question is more powerful than most people realize, because the emotional life of a visionary often determines the trajectory of their greatness. Human beings, not machines. No matter how intelligent, disciplined, or ambitious someone becomes, emotion still influences perception, energy, resilience, creativity, and purpose. Neuroscience itself confirms this. The emotional centers of the brain are deeply connected to motivation, decision-making, and long-term persistence. In other words, feelings are not distractions from greatness. They are often the hidden fuel behind it, and yet the world still misunderstands emotionally intense people. When someone operates at an extraordinary level, people often assume they have transcended ordinary human needs. But the opposite is usually true. The more pressure a person carries publicly, the more profoundly they crave emotional safety privately. Because ambition can create admiration, but admiration alone cannot heal exhaustion. It cannot quiet loneliness at 3 in the morning when the mind refuses to stop racing. It cannot replace the need to feel understood without performance. Lundquist, that is why the idea of a mystery woman captures human imagination so deeply. Not because of gossip, not because of curiosity, but because somewhere inside us we understand the symbolic meaning behind it. We understand that if someone capable of moving entire industries could still be emotionally moved by one person, then perhaps love remains the most powerful force in human existence after all. Think about how extraordinary that really is. Show me a single human connection strong enough to penetrate the emotional armor of someone who built their identity around control, logic, and relentless forward motion. A single presence capable of slowing a mind that normally operates at the speed of the future. That kind of connection does not happen through superficial attraction, it happens through resonance. And resonance is one of the most misunderstood concepts in human psychology. People think attraction begins with appearance. Sometimes it does, but deep emotional attachment begins with recognition. It begins when someone feels strangely familiar to your soul before your mind fully understands why. Their energy disrupts your emotional patterns. Their presence changes your internal chemistry. Conversations with them feel different from ordinary interactions because they stimulate something beyond intellect. PN. Suddenly, someone who normally dominates every room becomes unusually attentive, unusually reflective, unusually vulnerable, and vulnerability is dangerous for highly driven people because they often survive by maintaining emotional control. Their entire life becomes structured around prediction, strategy, and momentum. But love does not arrive according to schedule. It does not care about optimization. It does not wait for perfect timing. But then it enters unexpectedly and starts reorganizing emotional priorities from the inside. But then that transformation can feel terrifying to someone used to controlling outcomes. Because emotional connection introduces uncertainty. And uncertainty is uncomfortable for minds trained to solve problems. But this is where life becomes truly fascinating. The very people capable of transforming the external world often struggle most when confronting their internal world. They can solve engineering problems, financial problems, technological problems, but emotional truth is different. Emotional truth cannot be conquered through force. It must be experienced honestly, and perhaps that is why emotionally intelligent people become unforgettable. Not because they flatter ambition, but because they humanize it. And a truly extraordinary woman does not merely admire power, she sees beyond it. She recognizes the exhaustion hidden beneath the confidence. She notices the silence behind the public intensity. She understands that visionaries are often carrying invisible emotional burdens nobody else can see. That level of perception is rare. And rare things alter destinies because when someone feels genuinely seen for the first time, their entire nervous system changes. Walls begin lowering, defenses soften, the constant mental noise begins to quiet. They stop feeling like a symbol and start feeling human again. But then, and in a strange way, that emotional grounding can amplify greatness rather than weaken it. Strange people often assume love distracts ambitious individuals from success, but real emotional connection can actually sharpen purpose. It can stabilize the mind during chaos. It can create emotional resilience during failure. It can remind someone why their mission matters when exhaustion begins consuming them. The human spirit performs differently when it feels emotionally supported. That is not poetry. That is biology. MBDN's research consistently shows that emotional security increases cognitive flexibility, problem-solving ability, long-term persistence, and psychological endurance. Human beings literally think more expansively when they feel emotionally safe. This is ACT. So, imagine the impact of meeting someone capable of creating that feeling inside a person whose mind already operates at extraordinary levels. P&D editor, that is not a minor emotional event. That is combustion, and perhaps that is why history repeatedly shows us the same pattern. Behind many transformative individuals stood someone who emotionally anchored them during moments when pressure could have destroyed them. Not someone who controlled them, not someone who completed them, but someone who reminded them they did not have to carry existence alone. So GEM is zero because loneliness is the hidden tax of extreme ambition. Demands. The higher someone rises, the fewer people truly understand their psychological reality. Expectations grow heavier. Public perception becomes distorted. Every action becomes analyzed. Every mistake becomes magnified. Every relationship becomes harder to trust because success attracts performance from others instead of authenticity. Dan Nugas. That is why genuine connection becomes priceless. Not because powerful people need more admiration, but because they desperately need honesty. Gen someone who can speak to them as a human being instead of an idea. Then someone who can challenge them emotionally instead of simply validating them intellectually. To mend, you're someone whose presence feels calm in a life dominated by velocity. And here is what makes the mystery even more compelling. Ment, the woman who captures the heart of a visionary, is rarely ordinary in spirit herself. She carries depth, presence, intelligence, emotional gravity. She possesses the rare ability to exist beside ambition without becoming consumed by it. She understands that greatness is not built only through intellect but through emotional endurance, because the future is emotionally expensive. And when building impossible things costs energy most people never see, it demands sleepless nights, enormous psychological pressure, relentless uncertainty, and the ability to withstand criticism from people who cannot yet see the vision. Eventually, even the strongest minds begin searching for emotional refuge somewhere, not weakness, refuge. A gentle place where they can remove the armor for a moment and simply exist without needing to perform brilliance constantly. Fret, and maybe that is the deeper reason in the world becomes caught, fascinated by the woman who captures the heart of a visionary. Because people intuitively understand that behind every revolution is still a human being longing for connection like everyone else. No amount of achievement eliminates that need. No level of intelligence escapes it. No amount of power replaces it. Mejet, because at the end of the day, human beings are emotional creatures pretending to be purely logical. And the heart always reveals what truly matters eventually, especially when someone arrives who makes the future feel less lonely. Especially when someone arrives who makes the future feel less lonely. Because loneliness does not disappear when success appears. In many cases, it expands. The world sees influence, but the individual feels isolation. The world sees confidence, but the individual feels pressure. The world sees a person constantly moving forward, while privately that same person may be wondering whether anyone truly understands the emotional cost of carrying such enormous expectations. And then suddenly one conversation changes everything. Not because it is dramatic, not because it is perfect, but because it feels real. There is a profound psychological shift that happens when highly ambitious people encounter emotional authenticity. Their nervous system recognizes something unfamiliar in modern society: sincerity without agenda. In a world filled with networking, performance, image management, and strategic interactions, genuine emotional honesty feels almost shocking. And that is often how unforgettable connections begin, not through grand gestures, but through emotional recognition. Canal, one person sees through the noise, one person speaks without pretending. Erga, one person creates a space where the visionary no longer feels like a machine, and the effect is transformative. Night, you start noticing changes that cannot easily be explained externally. The intensity remains, but there is softness beneath it. Now the ambition remains, but it becomes infused with meaning beyond achievement itself. The future stops looking like an endless mission and begins looking like something worth sharing. God, that emotional shift is incredibly powerful, because human motivation evolves over time. Early ambition is often fueled by survival, insecurity, competition, or the desire to prove something. But eventually, those motivations become people can only run on adrenaline and validation for so long before exhaustion begins eroding them internally. Yeah, at some point, purpose must become personal, and personal purpose often emerges through human connection. Or suddenly, innovation is not only about building systems, it becomes about building a future someone you love can live inside safely. Progress becomes emotional. Vision becomes intimate. The mission gains a heartbeat. That is when greatness changes form, because the most transformative leaders are not driven only by ego, they are driven by emotional conviction, by the desire to protect, inspire, create, and elevate human life itself. And many times the catalyst for that evolution is not another business victory, it is another human being. Kim, a mysterious woman, not mysterious because nobody knows her name, mysterious because her impact cannot be measured publicly. The Kano, the world often misunderstands influence because it looks only at visible outcomes. But some of the strongest forces in human history were invisible emotional forces operating quietly beneath the surface. Encouragement, understanding, loyalty, belief, emotional grounding. These things rarely appear in headlines, but they shape destiny. Think about the psychology of emotional support for a moment. When a person constantly operates under pressure, their mind enters a near-permanent state of cognitive strain. Stress becomes normalized. Hypervigilance becomes habitual. Over time, this can create emotional numbness even in highly intelligent individuals. But authentic emotional connection interrupts that cycle. It reminds the nervous system what safety feels like again. And safety is where creativity expands most powerfully. And this is why some of humanity's greatest breakthroughs emerged not during emotional isolation, but during periods of profound emotional connection. The brain functions differently when it no longer feels emotionally alone. Imagination becomes bolder, risk tolerance becomes healthier, resilience increases dramatically. Love does not weaken vision, love stabilizes vision. And perhaps that truth terrifies people who built their identities around emotional independence, because dependence has been portrayed as weakness for generations. Society glorifies self-sufficiency. We celebrate people who need nobody. But neuroscience tells a different story. Human beings are biologically wired for connection. Emotional bonds regulate stress, improve cognition, and strengthen psychological endurance. Connection is not weakness. It is infrastructure for the soul. And the truly extraordinary woman understands this intuitively. She does not compete with the mission. She becomes part of the emotional architecture that sustains it. She recognizes the difference between ambition and obsession, between drive and self-destruction. She knows when to challenge, when to support, when to remain silent, and when to remind someone they are still human beneath the weight of their vision. The kind of emotional intelligence is rare because it requires depth beyond appearances. Anyone can admire success. Very few people can emotionally hold space for the human being beneath it. And this is where relationships either become transformational or destructive. Superficial attraction cannot survive extreme pressure for long. Fame cannot sustain emotional intimacy. Public excitement fades quickly when confronted with real psychological complexity. But emotional depth creates durability because eventually every visionary reaches moments of collapse internally. Moments where doubt enters quietly. Moments where exhaustion becomes unbearable. Moments where failure feels personal instead of strategic. And during those moments, titles mean nothing. You can have money means nothing. Public applause means nothing. What matters is whether there's someone capable of looking into your eyes and reminding you why your existence matters beyond your productivity. That is the kind of woman who captures the heart of someone extraordinary, not because she worships greatness, but because she understands humanity. And humanity is what visionaries secretly search for most while building the future. Okay? The irony is beautiful when you think about it. People who dream about colonizing planets, reinventing industries, and accelerating civilization forward often become emotionally captivated by something incredibly simple: feeling understood. Yeah, not managed, not impressed. Understood because understanding creates emotional rest. And emotional rest is incredibly rare for minds that never stop moving. Let's imagine what it feels like for someone accustomed to carrying enormous intellectual responsibility to suddenly experience emotional peace beside another person. For the first time in years, maybe decades, they stop performing internally. They stop calculating every interaction. They stop preparing for criticism before it arrives. They simply exist. That feeling becomes unforgettable. And perhaps that is why truly deep love often feels almost supernatural to highly analytical minds. It defies optimization. It transcends logic. It creates emotional experiences too profound to fully quantify. You can model economic systems. You can simulate machine learning. You can predict market behavior. But you cannot fully explain why one human being suddenly becomes emotionally irreplaceable to another. That mystery remains one of the most beautiful unsolved equations in existence, and maybe it should remain unsolved. And because not everything meaningful is meant to become mechanical. Some things are valuable precisely because they cannot be fully measured. Like trust, like loyalty, like presence, like the quiet look between two people who understand each other beyond language itself. That is the kind of connection capable of altering the emotional trajectory of a visionary life. And once someone experiences that depth of connection, they begin changing in ways the world may never fully recognize. Their relationship with time changes. Their relationship with ambition changes. Even their definition of success evolves. Because success without emotional meaning eventually feels empty, no matter how massive the achievement becomes. The human heart always asks a deeper question eventually. Who is all of this for? And when someone finally finds the person who answers that question emotionally, everything changes. And when someone finally finds the person who answers that question emotionally, everything changes. And the future no longer feels like an abstract destination floating somewhere beyond the horizon. It becomes intimate, personal, alive. Suddenly, every breakthrough carries emotional weight because there is someone whose existence gives those achievements meaning beyond headlines and history books. And that is the moment ambition evolves into legacy. Because legacy is not merely what you build, it is who you become while building it. Yeah, and the people who influence that transformation often remain invisible to the public eye. History remembers the inventor, the founder, the visionary standing in beneath the spotlight. But history rarely sees the quiet emotional moments that prevented that person from collapsing under pressure. It rarely sees the conversations that restored hope during exhaustion, the reassurance offered during failure, the calm presence that made chaos survivable. Yet those moments shape destinies just as much as strategy does. Okay, the mystery woman who captures the heart of a visionary is powerful not because she controls the story, but because she changes the emotional atmosphere in which the story unfolds. She becomes a gravitational force, a grounding force, a reminder that behind all the futuristic thinking and impossible dreams, Psyche is still a human soul searching for meaning like everyone else. And perhaps that is why audiences around the world become so fascinated by these stories. Because deep down people are not merely interested in success, they are searching for proof that greatness and humanity can still coexist. They want to believe that even in an age dominated by technology, speed, algorithms, and artificial intelligence, the human heart still matters. And it does more than ever because the more artificial the world becomes, the more valuable authenticity becomes. Think about the direction humanity is heading. Machines are becoming capable of generating conversations, art, music, predictions, even emotional simulations. In higher digital realities are emerging where people may eventually struggle to distinguish performance from truth. In that kind of future, genuine emotional connection becomes revolutionary. A real conversation becomes priceless. A sincere relationship becomes rare. Again, a person who truly understands you becomes almost sacred. And perhaps that is why love stories connected to powerful minds feel so emotionally compelling. They remind us that no matter how advanced civilization becomes, there are still experiences technology cannot replace. No machine can replicate the feeling of emotional safety created by another human being who genuinely sees you. No algorithm can manufacture authentic trust. Okay, no artificial system can fully imitate the electricity of real emotional resonance between two souls. That remains uniquely human. And maybe that is humanity's greatest strength moving forward. Not our intelligence alone, not our inventions alone. Okay? But our ability to create emotional meaning, because meaning is what prevents progress from becoming empty. Without emotional depth, innovation eventually becomes sterile, efficient but soulless, advanced but disconnected from the very people it was meant to serve. This is why the future will require more than brilliant engineers and ambitious leaders. It will require emotionally conscious visionaries who understand that technology should elevate humanity, not replace it. And often the people who help shape that emotional awareness are the ones closest to the visionary heart. Yeah, the ones who remind powerful minds not to lose themselves inside their own momentum. Yeah, the ones who say, slow down for a moment, feel this, experience this, remember why you started. That reminder can save a person emotionally because the danger of extreme ambition is not failure. It is emotional disappearance. It is becoming so consumed by missions, deadlines, expectations, and external pressure that you slowly lose connection with your own humanity. You continue functioning, continue building, continue achieving, but internally something essential begins fading. And then one extraordinary person walks into your life and awakens it again. Not through perfection, not through fantasy, but through presence, real presence. For Kat, the kind that makes someone feel emotionally safe enough to remove the armor they have worn for years. That kind of connection is transformative because most people never experience true emotional transparency. They spend their lives performing versions of themselves they think the world will accept, stronger than they feel, colder than they are, less vulnerable than they secretly wish they could be. But authentic love dissolves performance. Um, it creates a space where someone no longer needs to pretend. And when a visionary experiences that freedom, their energy changes dramatically. They become more grounded, more reflective, more emotionally expansive. The mission remains ambitious, but now there is emotional gravity behind it, humanity behind it. Yeah, because ultimately the future is not only built through intelligence, it is built through emotional intention. You know, the technologies humanity creates will reflect the emotional state of the people creating them. If disconnected people build the future may become emotionally cold. But if emotionally awake people build it, the future can become more compassionate, more meaningful, more human-centered. That is why emotional connection matters on a civilization level, not just a personal one. Okay, love influences the architecture of the future in ways most people never notice. A supported mind creates differently than a lonely one. A hopeful spirit imagines differently than an exhausted one. An emotionally fulfilled person leads differently than an emotionally starving one. And maybe the mystery woman who captured the heart of a visionary did something much larger than inspire romance. And maybe she restored humanity to someone carrying the weight of tomorrow. Yeah, maybe she reminded an exhausted mind that beneath all the innovation and pressure, life is still about connection, and still about meaning, still about the courage to care deeply in a world that often rewards emotional detachment. Because emotional detachment has become modern society's favorite defense mechanism. People act indifferent to protect themselves from disappointment. They hide sincerity behind irony. They suppress feelings to avoid vulnerability. But eventually that emotional suppression creates emptiness no amount of success can fill. And the truly extraordinary people eventually realize something profound. The goal was never merely to conquer the future. Yeah, the goal was to remain fully alive while creating it. That realization changes everything. Yeah, because once someone understands that emotional depth is not weakness but power, they begin living differently, loving differently.